This is Planet Poet Words in Space on WIOX Community Radio. Today, author Ellen Greene Stewart is here in the studio to read from and discuss her latest book, Elephants, Up Close and Personal. Hi, Ellen.
Hey, Sharon.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome, and thank you. Here's Ellen's bio. In addition to Elephants, Up Close and Personal, published by Toplight, an imprint of McFarland Co., Ellen Greene Stewart is the author of Kaleidoscope, about the intersection of art therapy and dementia, Magnolia Street Publishing, Superheroes Unmasked, an emotional literacy curriculum for grade school children, Youthlight Publishing, and Mental Health in Rural America, Routledge Publishing, as well as numerous articles and peer-reviewed journals. Ellen has volunteered at the Knysna Elephant Park several times. She lives and works as an art therapist in rural upstate New York, and it's my particular pleasure to have Ellen on the show, not only because her work is so important and intriguing, but because our houses are about 100 paces apart in Roxbury, and we are great friends. Ellen, where is that Knysna Elephant Park?
It is in South Africa on the very southern coast. It's where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean meet. So it creates a sort of a unique biome. And the particular part of that country is called the Garden Route. And it has 8,000 different kinds of flora that are unique.
Amazing. So what is a biome? It's sort of a niche, an ecological niche.
Right.
And could you talk about a little bit about the founding of Knysna?
The Knysna was founded by a couple who he was in the construction business, and they had this farm that had belonged to his family members in the past, and they lived on the farm. And Lizette is her name, the wife's name, decided to adopt an elephant. And then it became two elephants that were up for, they needed a home, basically. And she didn't know really that much about them, but she was willing to find out. And the elephants were named Harry and Sally. Harry now lives in a different place, a different park nearby, and has his own family and partner. And I got to meet him, and he is by far the biggest elephant you could ever imagine. He's massive. And Sally remains at the Knysna Elephant Park as the matriarch, and gradually the park took on more and more, mostly orphaned elephants who needed homes, and so they can house up to 10. They have enough room to comfortably house 10 elephants.
And this is on their land?
On their own land.
On their own land. So you were not just a tourist, you were a volunteer.
Right.
At Knysna Elephant Park. And what was your day like as a volunteer?
I have to say the days were pretty rigorous. You're up and at the boma is the indoor nighttime structure for the elephants. They're not trapped in there, but they tend to go in there for shelter. So we met at the boma every morning at 7 o'clock sharp. And then after that, we would clean up the dung and the branches, leftover branches from the boma itself and from the field that's attached to it. So we cleaned up all the nighttime stuff. And by 9 o'clock in the morning, we had quite a workout.
Right. And the dung collection was for research.
Yes.
It's a major part of the research?
Right. And what they do is there's a lab on the premises, and Christina Thallander is the head of the lab and also does other jobs at the park. And she's amazing. She's from Denmark, and she analyzes samples from dung from every single elephant every single week. What she's looking for is cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone. So she wants to see if any of the animals are feeling stressed, but they also look for other signs like estrus markers and things like that. So they get a lot of information from the dung samples.
So your work is very important to this work.
Yes, the volunteers, they really rely on us, and you obviously don't need experience in order to do this, but they train you when you get there.
Mm-hmm. And what is the training like, the training for the field work?
It's really fascinating. First of all, elephants in this park are only African, as opposed to Indian elephants, which are smaller. Their coloring is different. They tend to have freckled necks, and their ears are smaller. Their ears are more like the shape of India, where African elephants' ears are more the shape of Africa.
How strange.
Yeah. And the African elephants are much bigger. Once you know the difference, there's no confusing the two. They actually really look different. So the first thing you have to know to be out in the field and take data is you have to be able to tell all 10 elephants apart. And that's not that easy.
No, I imagine it when you see them for the first time. You can't really distinguish too much. But you're a writer, so writers are observers and expert at detail. So I imagine it would be a little easier for you, perhaps.
I don't know. And then when you think you get it, sometimes you're wrong. So
how many weeks? Well, you stay for about 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
So after the first week, you really can identify them?
Pretty much, yeah.
And they know who you are, I'm sure, at that point. Do they know you?
I'm not sure because it's a tourist destination.
Oh, I see. So they see a lot of people.
So they see a lot of people in the course of a day. We dressed in the same colors as the guides, so that we sort of, in the elephant's mind, they would associate us with the guides who were
that's good
to them and protected them and not a threat to them.
And you were allowed to feed the elephants apart from your other duties on Sunday, is that correct?
Only on the weekends.
On the weekends. And would you tell us about, there's so many beautiful passages here about your portraits of the individual elephants and their characteristics. And there's one, if you can read, about feeding Shungo, if you want to give us a little intro or just read it.
Well, I have to just say Shungo was my favorite out of the 10. He's lowest in the totem pole in the hierarchy of this herd. And he just stole my heart because he stands at the far end of the barrier where they get fed fruit by tourists. And he just gives you the puppy dog eyes because the elephants in the middle get more food. And he's way on the end. And they all know their spots.
It's so human.
They're very human. And the reason why we can't feed the elephants themselves on a weekday is because we're out in the field taking data, and that's more important. So I was talking to one of the guides because I wanted to give my whole fruit bucket to Shungu, and the others were going to sort of crash into him to try to take over my fruit. So I asked Ndiebo how I could get that done and just give him the fruit, and he told me. So Shungo ate piece after piece of fruit so quickly I could hardly believe it. I offered an orange slice to him by holding my palm out and letting him use the fingers on his trunk to grasp it. The fingers are African elephants have opposable digits on the tip of their trunk where Indian elephants don't. The tip of his trunk was wet and rubbery and the hair on it bristly. I wished he'd slow down so I could savor the experience of feeding him. I loved every second of feeding him by hand, and at that moment the world felt balanced and right. He was in elephant nirvana and I was in a parallel bliss.
That's great. The book is called Elephants Up Close and Personal, and everybody would think that it's about up close and personal with the elephants, but the reader gets to be up close and personal with you, Ellen, because of your engagement with the elephants. We empathize with you and relate to your joy in what you're doing. You're listening to Planet Poet, Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, here with Ellen Greene Stewart, author of Elephants Up Close and Personal. And Ellen, as I said, there are so many beautifully drawn stories of your experiences with the elephants you worked with in your book, and it's hard to choose from them. And you describe how many elephants in the book? About 10. But Sally, the matriarch, she started it. She's like the Eve of the
Exactly.
of Knysna Park. And what a personality. And the elephants, as you said, don't fool around. There's a real hierarchy. But within that hierarchy, there's compassion and all kinds of what I'm not trying to, make them into humans, but humans can relate to these characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
So would you read from the section called Sally the Matriarch?
Sure. Sally is dwarfed by the blue-gray mountains, the bright green valley, and the broody sky, the heavens. The sun pours itself over the park like some visible spirit. Doves sing arias, their refrain repeating over and over. Will they ever stop? Sally scans the horizon, her trunk partway in the air, making sure each member of her herd is accounted for. They stand at the barrier, a tangle of trunks beckoning food. Sally makes it look easy with her sassy but loving, larger-than-life personality. Her herd has complete trust in her, an implicit contract that she will look out for all and they will obey her. After the feeding session has ended, Sally and the others return to the field. Because she's the most experienced around humans, Sally is a good candidate for tourists to see up close. She's very tolerant of people gently stroking her, and seems to bathe in the oohs and ahs just as she soaks in the fruit from the buckets. She knows she's beautiful and a good matriarch, sometimes playing the clown by taking a large leaf branch from the ground and placing it over her back, leaving it there like a cloak. She appears to be smiling as people laugh at her antics, as if she understands the meaning of laughter. Dr. Debbie, who was the head research person at the park, laughs and recounts a story about a children's local TV show called Roughing It. When the TV crew came to the park to film an episode, unbeknownst to the park staff, some of the children had pellets in their pockets. Sally made her TV debut by sniffing their pockets and plunging her trunk into them, devouring the pellets.
Her influence and dominance really is throughout your book. As each describe each elephant and their relationship with her. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit more about her responsibilities to the herd?
Yeah, she's relieved of some of the responsibilities of a wild elephant. She doesn't need to have the same extent of spatial recognition that an elephant in the wild needs to know. Where's the nearest water hole? Where can I go for shelter? Where can we all go for shelter if we need it? What's the fastest way to get over this mountain? Those elephants know that. The matriarchs just somehow intuit it, I guess. She's relieved of that part of it, but even though Shungu is the lowest in the totem pole, one day there was a very far out field in the park that the elephants were grazing at, and all of the elephants came back to the main part of the park to graze, and some of them were a little bit restless and like something wasn't right, and Sally was picking up on it and knowing somebody was missing, and sure enough, Shungu never came back from the far field, so the guides had to go get him.
And how did she convey to the guides that Shungu was missing?
Well, they know how to read their body language, but she was restless and her head was going back and forth.
So they knew something was wrong.
Her trunk was up in the air, and she was sniffing as if to try to sniff him.
That's really remarkable. So that's part of the matriarchal behavior, but what the hierarchy of the herd is, that's her job to keep that going.
Yep.
And she's very possessive of that role that she has.
Yes.
But she's never really mean to the other elephants, is she?
No, but she can be a little bit bossy. There's an elephant named Nandi whose daughter was born there, Tondi, and Tondi is now probably 20.
This is the daughter.
The daughter.
Of Nandi.
Yes,
yeah.
of Nandi. And Sally, at this point, is probably 30. And elephants can live to 60, 70, you know,
Amazing.
especially in a protected situation like that. And that's because they have no predators except for people. Isn't that an amazing thing? There are no predators. Sometimes a lion cub will go after a baby elephant, but usually the herd protects the baby and, yeah.
You describe the early lives of the elephants before they come to the park. And one particular elephant, Keisha, is quite remarkable. So remarkable that there was the Knysna Elephant Park has a particular Keisha project.
Right.
And would you describe Keisha's beginnings?
Keisha was what they call translocated from a different park with her mother when she was an infant of a couple months old. Elephants need to nurse from their moms for the first 2 complete years because they're not equipped to really eat very much regular food. So in the process of translocating them, Keisha's mother died on the trip. And so she arrived at the Knysna Elephant Park, which was a strange place, didn't know anybody, and didn't understand what happened to her mother. So they nursed her with a special bottle formula. She was bottle fed and ended up surviving and thriving, but not without its traumatic scar on her. So Keisha is most people's favorite. She has very big gouges on both ears because she tried to nurse from some of the other females there in the park, and they got annoyed and they would, you know, kind of bat her away. And so somehow her ears tore. So she's the easiest to recognize because all you have to do is see her ears with the characteristic holes in them, and you know that that's her. So what she does is, in the boma at night, most of the time they sleep standing up. She does this very strange body wiggle that they call weaving, and so the researchers are trying to find out what's causing her to do this weaving behavior. It's not every night. She could go for months without doing it and then all of a sudden start doing it again. So what they did was they installed an infrared light and a camera on the roof of the boma. And so the Keisha project is looking at films every single night in sped up films to look for the weaving behavior and track that data and then compare it to other data from other studies.
Of other elephants? Who
of these other, this herd, to see if maybe somebody bothered her in the field and that made her weave at night. Or
So it's a very unusual behavior
it's
that
unusual,
they don't see.
Yeah. And I really chose to focus on the Keisha project. I watched film after film I probably watched a week's worth of films almost every day because they're sped up. And you know, once you've seen her do this behavior, you know what you're looking for.
Right. Can you go to the boma at night? Can you observe the elephants?
Yes. Yep. We often did.
And they ignore you, or they don't see you?
They don't see you because you're in a sort of a balcony.
Okay.
Looking down on them.
And Keisha sleeps on her side? Is that true? One of the elephants sleeps on their side?
Some of them sleep on their side, but most of the time they sleep standing up.
Ellen, would you read a passage about Keisha and her compassion, actually?
I would love to.
Thank you. She's the way she relates to her guides and to everyone.
It's a sparkling clear day at the park, the afternoon heat building to an unbearable level. I wonder if a thunderstorm could pop up at dusk. In the distance, I see Shepherd, he's a guide, hiking down the slope from higher ground, and a lumbering Keisha at his side. They amble toward the field shelter where the guides can escape from intense rain or sun. Shepherd lowers himself to sit on a log, his leg stretched out in front of him, a pained look on his face. He pulls up the leg of his pants, revealing a bleeding wound from a sharp branch piercing his skin. Keisha saunters off as the guides begin to chatter amongst themselves. Several minutes later, Keisha returns with a mound of thick mud wrapped in her trunk. She strolls over to where Shepherd sits. Lo and behold, she began applying the mud to his wound as she would do for herself. Shepherd said it took his breath away. He knew it was a loving gift from Keisha.
That is one of the most extraordinary things I've ever heard. Did you know Shepherd?
I did.
What was he like?
Oh, he had the most amazing smile. Unfortunately, we've lost him since I was there, but
he moved on to another.
No, he passed away.
Oh dear.
But he had the most amazing smile, and he was so calm and quiet, very quiet. He and I walked next to Shungu. Sometimes the guides take the elephants on a long walk in a row, and each elephant again knows his place. And for some reason, Shungu, even though he's at the bottom of the herd, was always first in line for the walk. So I walked with Shepherd next to him, which was such an honor because I liked Shepherd so much, and I liked Shungu so much, and it was like Shungu's little moment of fame that he got to lead the pack in these walks.
So walking with the elephants, and how was it walking with this? How many elephants? 10 elephants? How strange and wonderful. You're listening to Planet Poet Words in Space on WIOX Community Radio. We're live and local in the Catskill Mountains at 91.3 FM and MTC Cable Channel 20. And I'm your host, Sharon Israel, here with Ellen Greene Stewart, author of Elephants, Up Close and Personal. And Ellen, this is such a comprehensive book. I would recommend to anybody who wants to know about elephants. There's the technical side, the science side, and then the up close and personal side of interacting with them. So when did you start to know that you needed to write a book about the elephants?
It's an interesting question. The first time I went, I was in the middle of the mental health book. Mm-hmm. And so my mind was really not on anything but coming home from the trip and finishing that. And when I finished it, it's like you go through a decompression after working on something for so long and so intensely. And I couldn't stop thinking of the elephant park. It was on my mind every day. And
you already had traveled there once.
I had already been once for 3 weeks. So all of a sudden, it just dawned on me, well, maybe I should be writing a book to help the elephants.
Not for yourself, to help the elephants.
Right. And the park. Mm-hmm. And so I went through a process of asking Lizette through other people. I didn't have direct access to her. And we developed a contract. Mm-hmm. And so I had a contract to write the book. So I went back with the purpose of interviewing all the guides that wanted to be interviewed, the staff, and in a way the elephant themselves.
Mm-hmm. And the writing process, once you've gathered your materials and started writing, how did you get the balance between the personal stories and the comprehensive info on the elephant physiology, psychology, and research, which anyone who's interested in elephants would be surprised by the extent of your compilation of this research and the astounding nature of it, actually. Mm-hmm. So how did you get the balance, and were you thinking of doing both at the same time from the beginning?
I didn't know how I was going to do it in the beginning. I just knew that once I made up my mind and got permission, I was all systems go. So I did go back for 3 weeks. The struggle for me the whole time was finding a balance between the factual information and the personal. And I'm still not sure I really got it 100% right, but it went through lots of different stages. So that was a big struggle.
It's a book that the reader can go back to for that factual information.
True. I like to research, so if it's a subject I'm interested in, I probably, this is true for the mental health book too, probably read 20 to 25 books and articles.
And you did this after your second trip or before the second trip?
I started to read before the second trip, and I continued afterward. And they gave me plenty of time. Instead of me having to be out in the field all the time, I was out in the field, but I also had time to interview the guides, probably an hour for each. And then I came home and transposed notes, and it was a really
intensive
process.
Very intensive, because you were still volunteering to
Yes.
do the data collection and everything else you were doing. That's very exciting.
Yeah, it was. It was very exciting.
I think most poets and writers would want to know about, Ellen, the publication process. And you are very persistent. You really are determined to find a publisher for your work. And how did you go about it, and how would you suggest people going about getting published?
Well, I think persistence is the biggest characteristic to have. This book was rejected probably 40 times between agents and publishers.
And this is the way it goes, so, right?
Right.
You're very cognizant of that.
Yep. The mental health book was it was a little quicker because I knew that was an area that hasn't been covered, was rural mental health.
Right.
So I knew that there was a void in the literature. This one, there are tons of books on elephants. This one is different only in that it includes a lot more up close and personal than most of the others. But you can't get a top-notch big publisher without having an agent. So I was trying to get an agent and thinking that if I'm going to write yet more books I really want to have an agent. So I've yet to accomplish that, but
you got published without an agent, which is
Right.
good.
Right.
Very good.
right. And I have to say that McFarland was really lovely to work with for the most part. They did a beautiful job on the cover.
It's a lovely cover. And it's a good-looking book.
Thank you.
It's nice, easy to read. It's great.
So I would say persistence.
And a good cover letter.
A good query letter.
Good
a really
query-
punchy query letter.
letter.
Yeah, so I worked really hard on the query letter. And I have to say, thinking back on it, 3 out of the 4 books were responded to immediately because I was emailing query letters within a day or 2.
Amazing.
All 3 of them.
Amazing.
After having been rejected
You mean after having been rejected?
by others.
Right.
All
Then-
3 ended up being picked up right away after I sent the
It's
email.
an amazing process, right?
It's totally unpredictable.
It's unpredictable. It's subjective on the part of the publishers. It's luck if you click at the right time.
Right.
That's why persistence is so important, and why you can't take it personally. You can't take rejection
Right.
personally.
The first book, Art Therapy in Dementia, I had sent it out a bunch of times. It was my graduate school thesis rewritten into book form. And what happened was Ronald Reagan passed away, and it became known that he had dementia. So I dusted it off and sent it out again, and there it was.
Wow.
So timing is
So
a piece
yes,
of it.
and that's everybody. Luck is the result of a lot of hard work and intuition, and knowing what's timely.
Right.
That's a Great advice. And you can have things that are dormant that you write, and all of a sudden you'll feel that they are appropriate to send out again. Talking about poems also.
Right.
I'm going to read a poem by poet and critic Dan Chiasson called The Elephant. How to explain my heroic courtesy? I feel that my body was inflated by a mischievous boy. Once I was the size of a falcon, the size of a lion. Once I was not the elephant I find I am. My pelt sags, and my master scolds me for a botched trick. I practiced it all night in my tent, so I was somewhat sleepy. People connect me with sadness and often rationality. Randall Jarrell compared me to Wallace Stevens, the American poet. I can see in the lumbering tercets, but in my mind, I am more like Eliot, a man of Europe, a man of cultivation. Anyone so ceremonious suffers breakdowns. I do not like the spectacular experiments with balance, the high wire act and cones. We elephants are images of humility, as when we undertake our melancholy migrations to die. Did you know, though, that elephants were taught to write the Greek alphabet with their hooves? Worn out by suffering, we lie on our great backs, tossing grass up to heaven as a distraction, not a prayer. That's not humility, you see, on our long final journeys. It's procrastination. It hurts my heavy body to lie down. It's a beautiful, poignant, and witty poem by poet and critic Dan Chiasson. You have a section called The Elephant Superpower, all about the zombie gene. And that's a really interesting way to reel the reader in for a scientific explanation. Could you read from that segment, please?
Sure.
Section?
Considering their enormous body size, elephants have surprisingly low rates of cancer. According to Athena Actipis, in the cheating cell, susceptibility to cancer differs across life forms due to some trade-offs, such as the cost of being large, growing fast, healing wounds, and being a viable reproductive candidate. Shockingly, some species have developed cancer suppression mechanisms through evolution, and elephants are among those. And then in the book, it goes into a very technical discussion about the TP53 gene and a few other things that scientists are finding protects the elephants against cancer.
Do humans have that gene?
No.
Wow.
Recently, scientists have identified another genetic difference in elephants as compared to smaller mammals. Leukemia inhibitory factor, or LIF, also known for its role in fertility, may be the second hand at the electric chair of killing cancerous cells. That's what happens is the discussion in the book talks about how it, like little Pac-Men, they go around eating the cancerous cells. And where most mammals have just one copy of LIF, elephants have 20 of them. Wow. One subcategory of LIF, which is called LIF6, has to date only been found in elephants. Scientists have traced it back 59 million years to the prehistoric Proboscidean ancestors of the elephant, the mastodons. And it goes on. It's a pretty technical discussion. And what happened was, after I came home from my second trip, I think it was, I found out, like within a week or two of coming home, which is sort of a real culture shock, after 3 weeks in a totally foreign environment, to find out that I had another episode of breast cancer. I had already had one in the past. So this was even more poignant to me, that elephants could actually...
And you're fine now, I just want to say. You're fine now.
Yes, I'm fine
yes,
now.
Yes.
Thank God. But
Is the research being done to see how humans can benefit from this?
well, yeah, that I think that I don't know exactly where it's being
Sure.
done, but
Yeah.
but now scientists are really working on figuring out the link between these genes and cancer suppression.
It's fascinating.
So it could be that elephants lead us to the cure.
If we don't kill them all
Right.
first.
Right.
It's crazy. So this is just one way that elephant research benefits humanity. And can you give us another example?
Well, elephants are what they call a keystone species, meaning that their waste and byproducts feed other species, smaller generally, birds and mammals and things like that. So if we wipe out elephants, what are these other species going to? There's like a symbiotic relationship between all of them. How will they fare? And so you're not just wiping out elephants, you're wiping out other kinds of critters too.
Yes. And so far, our relationship to elephants is still pretty ambiguous, I guess.
It is.
It's and would you talk about how elephants symbolize our relationship to nature? You do that a lot in the book.
Symbolizing our relationship to nature, well, they're extremely intelligent. They're among the most intelligent creatures on the planet, aside from us and whales, let's say, certain whales. They have an extremely complicated hierarchy life. They're very family-oriented. I mean, without anthropomorphizing,
Yes.
they really are very similar to humans. It's astounding how similar, and they have to they're take care of their young for an extended period of time compared to most other species.
They recognize long lost
Yep.
relatives and elephant friends, and part of the herd.
And they also can recognize like 100 or 200 people that
Right.
they see frequently. They know the guides. They know one guide from the other. So there's just so many ways that they are human-like, or that we're elephant-like.
Yes, we could learn so much from studying them
We could.
and their compassion,
Right.
their compassion and empathy.
All the stories that most people have heard, these stories about elephants going to a pile of bones that had been some other elephant that they knew, and lingering there for sometimes days or even weeks.
It's the
And-
same thing. It's the same mourning process.
Exactly.
Wow. And another part of your book talks about elephant trunks and tusks and ears. I love what you said about the African elephant ears look like the continent, and Asian elephants have Asia-looking ears.
Right. It's really true.
So the trunks and tusks have different functions, or of course, the tusks are very valuable to certain humans.
Exactly.
And
The tusks are just teeth that are externalized. And they grow. Males and females can have tusks. Sally, for example, was born with only one tusk, and she gets along just fine. So, and evolutionarily, scientists are thinking that tusks may disappear or diminish in elephants because they do use them for digging and things like that, but it's not absolutely essential to have them.
so it'll be like our appendixes, sort of in
Right.
a few millennia or whatever,
Right.
a million years, who knows? But the trunks themselves are so complex.
Oh, the trunks are amazing. They have more muscles in an elephant trunk than in the whole human body.
That's astounding.
It is astounding. And when you think about it, they use them to snorkel, like when they're swimming. Their trunk sticks out of the water. They have the opposable digits at the tip of the trunk that allow them, they can pick up a single piece of popcorn and put it in their mouth.
I've seen it.
It's amazing.
It is the facility. The facilities.
They use the trunk for so many different things. It's an incredibly versatile thing. They can suck in water. They can push out water. They use it to breathe sometimes. They use it to smell. It's such a multifaceted organ.
This is a beautiful, beautiful part of the elephant.
It is.
And what I certainly find painful to talk about, the poaching crisis, the near extinction of elephants. Ellen, you have a whole section on that. Would you read a segment from your chapter, The Poaching Crisis, for us?
That was by far the hardest part of the book to work on, was the poaching. Although the elephant situation has improved in parts of the world due to ivory bans and reduction in human-animal conflict, poaching syndicates and corruption grow more sophisticated, more dangerous, and more ruthless. People must be educated so that they associate ivory with death, greed, and suffering, rather than luxury and fashion. One Kenyan campaign against poaching featured women wearing ivory jewelry next to photos of elephants with their faces whacked off and slogans like "dressed to kill" and "accessories to murder." We have a long path to blaze before we can relax about the future of elephants on our planet. Much work needs to be done in solving the root cause of the poaching problem, poverty, so that poaching isn't a career of necessity for so many of the world's poorest people. And that is the root cause, is poverty. If an elephant is worth more alive than dead.
People have to understand that.
And yes, most people do not understand that. And an elephant is in the mother's womb for 2 years. That's their gestational period. And that's a heck of a long time. So to produce another elephant, and then they have to nurse for a full 2 years. So it's the same slow process as a human.
Right. And they're being killed at a far greater rate than this process can be allowed to take place.
Right. Right.
Is it what's being done about it? I mean, you said some of the things that are being done, some bans, but it sounds like the people who are poaching need to have more subsistence help to make it less attractive for them. I mean, they're not monstrous people. They're just doing this out of
to feed their families.
To feed their families, and so I guess it's gone. Poaching is throughout history, but now I think with accelerated capitalism and greed and money, it's becoming a way, like exporting other things from, which takes away from the people who live in the communities where these.
Right.
Anyway, what can people do to help, Ellen? Either support the park,
people can support the park. It is a research. It's a bona fide research facility, and the way to do that is to go to Knysna. It's KNYSNA Elephant Park, all one word. .co.zz, like in zebra A, which stands for South Africa. Definitely no buying of ivory, or we need to have that banned all over the world. But there's other organizations. The World Wildlife Fund is very active and did some research at the Knysna Elephant Park while I was there. That was pretty interesting to watch. They were trying to put a sound collar on Keisha to test it out, because one of the problems in Africa is that wild elephants often come upon a farm at night and they eat the crops, and then the farmer doesn't have crops. So they're helping to develop systems for early warning to the farmers, so they can go outside and bang pots and pans
So
or whatever to
important.
scare the elephants
without
away.
without killing them.
Without killing them.
Yeah. And you say that individuals can, you talk about educating, persuading, and rallying, that each person can try to, even in general conversation, educate people about what they can do to help.
There was a point a few winters ago, where I almost threw the whole manuscript into the wood stove because I just had it. I was at my wit's end for whatever reason. I don't even remember. And the thing that made me keep going is to educate people as to their plight, to try to save the elephants. And I was so adamant about doing that it
got you through
pulled
it.
me through. And so what I would like for people to take away is that we all need to be ambassadors for them as a species. And it's to all of our benefits to do that. It would be a win-win.
Yes. Ellen, would you read the last paragraph at the last chapter of your book?
Sure.
For us, we'll go out with that.
The picture on that page is a very, very close-up of an elephant's eye with long, bristling eyelashes, and there's just nothing like looking directly into the eye of an elephant. I can't even explain it any better than that. It's a most amazing thing. Humankind clings to our beliefs as rigidly as an elephant's shackled legs. Some of us are alarmed at the rates elephants are killed, others unaware, perhaps disconnected from the natural world. What is clear is that the status of elephants is a barometer of the ecology of our planet. Ivory doesn't fall harmlessly out of an elephant's mouth the way a child loses a tooth. As many armchair warriors on this issue believe, getting involved is essential. Elephant lives greatly matter. Sitting by is unacceptable. It's imperative that we unchain our minds from outdated views and values and do everything in our power to stop the genocide and help protect these highly evolved creatures before it's too late. They're living, breathing beings that are largely peaceful, can recognize themselves in a mirror and remember faces and voices for decades. Dame Daphne Sheldrick described elephants as a kindred species to humans. How much more like elephants must we be before killing them equals systemic extermination?
Thank you, Ellen Greene Stewart, for this very important, for appearing on the show with this very important book that you've written. And if people are more interested in finding the book, it's available on Amazon.
On Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
And, okay. Wow, this hour really flew by. And thank you, Ellen, again. And thank you all for listening. We're going to go out with music by Robert Cucinotta.